My buddies call me Frostin'. I was a big bass guide in the Blue Ridge Mountains of western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, and North Georgia for over a decade. I sold my guide business, my tackle shop, my boat service center, and my real estate for my new venture, fishtips.com. Now my family and I travel the country helping fishing guides, pro anglers, and influencers from all corners of the U.S. catching all different species, create content, and scale their businesses digitally on fishtips.com. Join us on this wild adventure. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am really excited about today's video because I was out on a lake in Arkansas with a really good friend, and it was purely fall fishing at its finest. I mean, it was literally what I think about when I think about fall fishing. There was all things at play, and what I wanted to do today is go over exactly how we broke it down, and all the baits and everything we use. Links are down in the description of this video, but I want to go over kind of our thought process, what we were thinking, what we were seeing, how we were making decisions, and all that. So I'm going to narrate through the footage, and yeah, I think this will be highly educational. It should help you on your home bodies of water when you're trying to make decisions and just kind of confused, not knowing what to do. This time of the year, literally this time of the year, can just be so freaking grimy. So anyways, without further ado, let's get after it. First things first, I'm watching the footage. We pulled up on this area where apparently there was a monster school of just weeks ago. But as soon as we got there and checked the water temperature of the lake, my buddy Cole goes, "Dude, not good." I'm like, "What's up?" He said the water temperature has dropped literally 18 degrees. This specific body of water, the water temperature was in the mid 90s, like 95, 96 degrees. And he's like, this isn't good, because the water we were already seeing was around 81, 82 degrees. So naturally, he's like, they have moved, something has gone on, and we are just trying to figure out like what's going on. He's on the scope right now, just looking like, hey, is there bait in the area? You know, are there any fish? Is there isolated cover? He said there's some isolated cover. And then he threw a drop shot at a piece of cover, and he's just being goofy more than anything. But it was the first fish of the day, and it really didn't clue us in on anything. You know, it was a really, really small fish that ate a drop shot. I'm obviously laughing just at, like, he's just being goofy, because this lake has really big fish in it. And, you know, this was our first fish, a small fish. But we're immediately like, okay, the fish have moved. It's fall. The water temperature's dropped, you know, around 15 degrees. Like, what is the deal? And immediately it starts going in my mind, like, fall fishing, you really get fish dispersed throughout the entire water column. I mean, literally, you can catch fish out deep, 30, 40 foot of water. You can catch fish in shallow water. And that means everything's at play and everything's dispersed. So, you know, I'm like, all right, we're trying to take note. Now, I will say this. I did see some fish breaking right on the bank, and we'll get into that later in this video, but there were some fish breaking right on the bank in the rocks. So we go further down the dam, just see, okay, you know, this area, it gets kind of super deep, but there's some like ledgy stuff, there's some brush, whatever. So we go down the dam, we're throwing finesse stuff, and then we see them kind of lined in this depression on the bottom. And I'm like, huh, I wonder what that is. I mean, I knew they were bass, but I'm like, I wonder how they're gonna react. So Cole puts down the finesse worm, or the finesse drop shot. He picks up a jig, and he ends up catching a really nice fish right here. And looking back on it, you know, I think I should have thrown a swing head, something maybe a little different, you know, like a biffle bug or a sixth sense stroker crawl or something on a swing head to try to throw something different at these fish, because they were bellies on the bottom. Now, there were some fish too just around that were suspended on bait. And anyways, that was our first, like, pretty good fish. I think that fish ended up going like 3 pounds and 2 ounces. My audio wasn't working on the camera at the time, so I didn't have audio, which is actually why I'm narrating this whole thing. But it was like, okay, cool. he caught one on a drop shot. It was a dink. And then here was a depression in 25 to 30 foot of water. He was dragging a jig, and he ended up catching a really nice fish, right? So, okay, we've got kind of this deep offshore thing going on. And yeah, we're like, let's run with that for a little bit. So I ended up having a work call, and I'm on the phone, and Cole's like, hey, I'm going to hit some points that I know have some brush on them. I'm like, dude, freaking do it. I'm on the work call, and I'm talking to my team, my fish tips team, and all of a sudden he's like, you know, like I see him kind of point like a German short-haired pointer, like my little bird dog does when we're out in the fields hunting. And he ends up cracking a really nice fish right here. I think this fish ended up 4 pounds. And yeah, there he goes setting the hook. He's like, yeah, I got him. So now this is our second bite, kind of out deep, doing something similar. The first one was on a ledge in 25 plus foot of water. This fish was on a point with some brush on it. And now we're like, okay, like there's something going on. We got points, we got structure, that same kind of depth zone. This fish was probably in like 20 to 25. The other fish was like 25 to 30. So we're like, okay, we can target deep brush, deep structure with a jig. That is my immediate thought. And here's the deal. I feel like a jig bite is a forgotten bite in the fall. Fish love a freaking jig. I don't care if it's up shallow on docks. I don't care if it's mid-water column, whatever it is, dragging it on the bottom. Fish love jigs in the fall time. This was a really nice fish here, and I was really excited about it. I'm like, hey, there we go. Cole had a 3 and change pounder. I think that one was 4 pounds. And we're like, all right, we got the ball rolling. We think we have some sort of runnable pattern. Now, I will say these bites were probably 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes away from each other. So next deal is, I'm like, hey, if that's what's going on, deep, you know, a deep depression with a jig, a little bit deep brush on a point with a jig, let's go hit some more points. So we pulled up on this other point, and they were freaking loaded. And like I said, I wish I would have thrown a swing head or something and really just kind of around them, because I think that would have produced some bites. But we're fishing out here, and they're not really aggressive. We're seeing bait fish on the bottom too. They're not really chasing. I mean, there's like, just you look at their body language sometimes and you're like, dude, this freaking sucks. Like, they're not aggressive. They're not doing anything. I feel like if we had a deep crankbait to maybe kind of stir them up, that could have worked. But for the most part, it just wasn't really anything happening of any kind of regularity as far as their body language went. So we kind of slid down the point. I casted my jig in this brush pile, 1/2 ounce jig, 6th sense, and I'm like, dude, I definitely just got bumped. I set the hook, I'm reeling in, I'm like, dude, this is another good fish, right? We got a 3 pounder, we got a 4 pounder, and then I'm like, man, this is a really, really solid fish that I'm reeling in right here. I just boat flipped it. I'm like, man, that's our third really, really nice fish. I think this fish ended up going like 3 1/4 pounds, and I'm like, hey, that's good. You know, like, it's slow. He was like, dude, we're gonna smash him today. This lake's loaded with numbers and big ones, but it was grimy. And I'm like, all right, but hey, we got our third big bite. It's still kind of mid-morning. You know, it's not like it's a bite every few minutes. It's a bite every 45 to 50 minutes, which is grimy. I mean, that's absolutely tough mentally, but it was another good fish. And I'm like, all right, so this is the deal. Well, we ended up fishing that a little bit longer, and we could not get anything else rolling. So naturally, I was like, hey, we need to run to the back of a creek. Like, it's fall time. We should just always check, and this is food for thought. You should always check the back of a creek in the fall. There's always some sort of threadfin moving back in the fall. I don't necessarily think, like, hear me out. For a majority of my career, I've been a guide on herring lakes. And there's herring, main lake, mid creek, mouth of creek, back of creek. Like, there's blueback herring everywhere. So for me, I'm like, this whole shad migration thing, I don't necessarily know if it's a hoax or what, but I've noticed on lakes with gizzard shad and threadfin, it's not a hoax. Like, there is a legit threadfin migration. So we went to the back of this creek, and immediately we started noticing schooling fish. We're hanging out, we're goofing around, you know, we're like, hey, there's got to be something going on back here. And we turn, and I hear some fish schooling. I'm like, hey, look right there, dude, there's some fish schooling. So we're seeing a lot of fish breaking at this point, and I'm like, you know, what's going on. They're not eating the chatterbait. I can tell the bait they're on is maybe 2.5, 3 inches. And I'm like, I think that we need to go with like a rattle trap or something. So I pick up a lipless crankbait. I tie it on. Literally my first cast out there, I bombed that booger way out to the point like I was down to the backing of the spool, and immediately my rod just goes ding, and I set the hook, and I'm like, dude, this is a big one. Like I could immediately feel it pulling drag out there, head shaking. It's gonna come up, jump, and just act crazy. And I'm like, man, this is a really nice fish. And immediately I'm like, this is what fall fishing is. We think we're on a pattern out deep, we're pumped up about it, whatever, got it rocking and rolling, and then it dies for whatever reason, and we're in the back of a creek, we're throwing a trap, and you know, catch a really nice fish right here. Absolutely choked on this thing. I mean, when he thumped it, dude, I was like, God, law, this old biggin. But it ended up being a pretty skinny fish. I thought it was a 4-pounder when it was out there. It ended up being another like mid 3, like 3.6, I think is what it went, right in the middle of a pocket. So it wasn't bad. So staying on that note, I'm like, all right, we're around them in the back. We're seeing schools of fish on the scope. We're seeing them school on top. Like, we are definitely around fish. And I literally just pick up my deal. I make another cast right here, 2 casts. I was burning it in, and boom, just like that. Like, I mean, just 2 minutes later, caught another fish. Not a big one. I mean, this is probably, I think it was a keeper. I mean, I don't know what keepers are. Chatterbait. Yeah, I mean, it's a keeper, but it wasn't anything of any sort of substance. But the whole while we're doing this, I'm still noticing fish breaking on the bank kind of periodically throughout the day. Now, the water here in Arkansas, it has dropped. There hasn't been a lot of rain, but it dropped. And one thing I know about dropping water in the fall time is the brim that are up there have nowhere to go except they'll get in the kind of nooks and crannies of the rock that's left in the water, or they'll get on isolated cover. Well, I get up on the bank and I immediately see wolf packing. I see like 2 4-pounders go by. I see 3 4-pounders go by. I see a solo 5-pounder, and I'm like, dude, this is the deal. Like, I think this might be something. And I pick up a glide bait, and I'm just like, I'm gonna cover water, and I'm seeing a lot of fish cruising, just kind of really 2.5 to 5 foot off the bank, wolf packing together. And occasionally I'm seeing them blow up on the bank. So I'm like, dude, I know what to do. When I fished, when I guided in Western North Carolina, like, I knew immediately this was the deal. I'm like, hey, we got to cover water with a glide bait. I'm probably gonna get bit. So I'm like, man, I've been here before, and immediately, dude, I mean, just like 5 or 6 casts into them wolf packing, freaking giant. I hook up with it on the trick shad. I go to boat flip it. I didn't retie my knot from like 4 or 5 days prior to this, and I broke off a $200 glide bait, which I can say wasn't my greatest moment. I held it together. I did not cuss at all or anything that I think or know of, but I was pretty upset, and you know, that would have really, you know, we had essentially a 4 and, you know, 3 mid 3, so 3.7, 10.5, 4, 14.5, and I think that fish was like close to 5.5, 6 pounds, which would have put us right at 20 pounds on the day. But that's fall fishing, man. I mean, literally how that day shaped up, I'm like, dude, there were multiple patterns at play. There was fish wolf packing in inches of water. They were giants, apparently. We just figured out at the end of the day. There were solid fish out deep, offshore, and brush. Anything and everything in between, right? So, you know, that is fall fishing. You have to stay flexible. You have to make adjustments. You have to really, if there is one key on the day, you just have to pick up on what's going on around you. We saw breaking fish up the creek, blowing up, fall migration, shad migration. I'm like, okay, we catch a good one. You know, we're paying attention to our electronics and where these fish would disperse, kind of points near where they were schooled up for the summer, catch a couple good ones on a jig. We'll see them blowing up on the bank in a specific area, on a specific type of bank. We go run it, you know, have a good one on a glide bait. And it wasn't a numbers deal. Fall is never a numbers deal. Don't know why. It's really hard unless you just find them so grouped up and schooling on bait fish. It can be a numbers deal and size deal. But a lot of times I just notice I have to fish multiple different ways. I have to keep my head on a swivel and really pay attention to everything going on around me to make the best decision that will relate to more fish in the boat. So anyways, I hope you learned something in this video. Like I said, my takeaways are definitely keep your head on a swivel, stay flexible, fish a lot of baits. And like I said early in the video, all the baits are down in the description. I appreciate you guys a ton for watching this video. And until next time, I'm out. Thanks, y'all. See ya.